those people who leave are the ones who are uncomfortable, who are feeling stressed. There are those who are not stressed by cheating. They stay and they cheat the organization.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to DenkTank, the podcast from Denk Productions. And I'm here for a very special episode because I'm here with nobody less than Robert Cialdini, aka Dr. Bob himself. And normally, listeners of DenkTank would know that I am Christ Coolen, host of the show, together with Hans Jansen. But today I have somebody else, Jitske Kramer. Jitske, welcome.
Thank you.
We are here for a special interview with Robert Cialdini. And my first questions to you is why do you want to talk to him? Because you're gonna ask him some very interesting questions. But why was it that you wanted that?
Well, I'm an anthropologist,
yes,
and I try to understand how people shape cultures, and how cultures shape people. Yeah. And all the principles you wrote about is in the core of how people shape things in cultures and how they work and live together. And I think that your work has made such a profound impact globally and we looked how we perceive influence in marketing and communication. And at the moment, I'm working on a book which is called Tricky Times, describing the times of change we go through in different places in the world and organizations and all that. And I was just very curious in how you would apply your principles in a changing world. Can we learn from it? So that was the initial thought. So that's why.
Yes.
And if I start with the first question, I'd like to go back in time a little bit, because I noticed that you wrote the book in 1984, which is
yes, I did.
Which is quite a time ago. What made you write it? If we go back to those days.
There were no books like it, and in which a behavioral scientist, which I am now and I was then, no books in which a behavioral scientist summarized the findings of the science, in my case, persuasion science, for a non-academic audience. We always just traded the results of our experiments and our studies with one another in scientific journals or outlets of one sort or another. And it struck me as very unfair because the people who paid for our research were in the non-academic community. With their taxes and with their contributions to our universities, they paid for those results that we found. They were entitled to know what we found out with their money. And so I thought it was time to write for an audience outside of the academic community.
And what were your hopes when you put it out there? What were you hoping that people would do with it? Because what happened? Was it what you hoped for?
Actually, the hope was a different one than what evolved. The book was written for consumers, how to recognize and resist these tactics when they are used in dishonest or misleading ways, to warn people about operators and manipulators who use these strategies to trap them into assent of one sort or another. And that first edition was for consumers, but no consumer group ever called me.
Wow.
But my phone didn't stop ringing from requests from marketers and advertisers and salespeople to say, well, you've written about the influence process. Can you come and talk to our group about our salespeople or our managers or our public relations specialists about how we can do better? And I thought, well, if I add the component of ethical influence, then I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to make the shift to the influencing community.
Because that was a tricky thing, right? So you wrote it to make people cautious of it, and now suddenly the ones who might trap people were using your principles.
Right. So I had to inform them about the costs of using it unethically. There are enormous costs of tricking people into compliance.
What are the costs if you look at it?
The first one is if you do it enough, people recognize that you're cheating them, that you've misled them. They will never come back to you. Have you ever had an experience where someone misled you into a choice?
Yeah, and I think you're right that people won't come back if they find out. But if you use the tricks very well, they might not find out.
Unless now that we are observers of these strategies, go on the internet and reveal them for what they've done. They have to be penalized. They have to experience the consequences of their misuse of the principles. And I think we can do that.
Because that happens, right? People do misuse the principles. So how does that make you feel? Because
I feel that that's a cost that I'm willing to bear, because as long as I try to confront those people and give them penalties for doing it, then it's in everyone's interest to know what the principles are that cause them to say yes, so they can ethically use them and they can properly deflect or reject them when they are misused.
Yeah.
I mean, these principles are very powerful.
They are.
Okay, but so is a stick of dynamite, right? You can use that dynamite to blow up a bridge, or you can use it to help build that bridge. Well, if we only focus on the constructive aspects, then and penalize anyone who blows up those relationships and those that trust, then I'm happy that I'm doing my best.
Yeah, and I understand. And if I look about the times we live in, so anthropologists call it liminality, the messy middle of change, where you know that what was no longer is, but you have no clue yet what it will be like.
Right.
And that's the phase of transformation. And to what I see in the world, in many places, we are going through such a big change on society level, really questioning very core values of our systems.
Right.
And that means that lots of the principles you write about, they're kind of broken, because I'll push forward a counter narrative, and therefore I disrupt the relationship. People might not feel unity, or consistency is scattered, or so how can I use your principles if I'm in the business of putting forward a counter narrative, a different view in the world, which might be a minority view, but which is important if we look at change? What would you say to people who do that, who start movements?
The people who start movements, if they have merit, even though they're not popular or in the majority, they will gain traction. They will gain adherence. They will gain subscribers, members to their ideas. And what you do is publicize the trend. Because the research shows that if you say, 20% of people believe what I believe, that's misguided. It means 80% don't. Yeah. But the research shows if you say 2 years ago, 10% of people believed. Last year it was 15. This year it's 20%. Now you can get people looking to you and saying, well, maybe there's something here because there's a trend. And I've done some of the research. The research is clear. If you can show 3 points, you need 3 points. 1 point, let's say 15%, that's just a statistic, right? 2 points, last year it was 15, this year it's 20. That's a change. But changes can flatten out, they can go up, or they can reverse. But if you say 2 years ago it was 10, last year it was 15, and this year it's 20, now you have a trend.
And therefore it becomes easier for people to join that trend.
That's right. They project the trend into the future, saying that this will become increasingly popular.
And yet at the same time, when we see that going on in big change processes, when there's a trend of an upcoming new voice, the power of the old system would also, go and try to fight for their old stories and make that happen. So what can we do with that? Which principle can we use to counter those negative powers looking into the future?
You can expose them for what they're doing. That they're using power instead of wisdom or argument to cause this change, or the arguments that they're using are not valid. I mean, because we have the internet now, we're able to puncture the highly powerful people and gain our own membership in our idea, in our unit.
That sounds, and I'm just thinking, okay, there is so much like when you wrote the book, there was internet, but not really, was there?
No.
I mean, no. I remember, I was 11 at that time. I remember the time without mobile phones.
Yeah.
So now it's there. So there is the extra amplification of algorithms and everything which is going on. Once you put something out there, it's kind of out of control. It just happens.
Yes, right.
What my concern is, if I look at that and as an anthropologist and look at your principles, my concern is that the power of them get lost and squeezed in the algorithms of the World Wide Web. So how can we still use those when others go misuse our information or our good intentions?
We go primitive. Okay. When I wrote that book first wrote it in 1984, there was no internet. And yet today that book is called The Bible of Online Marketing.
Really?
And people will ask me, how could you have known that these principles would be so effective in something that didn't exist? How could you look forward and see this? And I always say, I didn't look forward. I looked inward. I looked at who we are as a species. What are the factors that have always, for eons, moved us toward ascent? Right? We can combat the new and perhaps misleading forces by going primitive, going to the things that have always moved us. Social proof, liking, authority, consistency. These are the things that have always lent us good guidance in going forward. And so we concentrate on those levers of influence to combat those that have less primitive power to motivate.
Wonderful. And when I look at change, I tend to say we're a little bit lost. So if you're lost, you don't know the way. You're looking for the way where to go. And if you're lost, I went to do a course in how to find a way back when you're in nature. So with a natural navigator. And he told me, well, the first thing you do is to acknowledge that you're lost. The ones who don't die and the ones who accept, they actually find the way. And the first thing which can happen if you're lost with a group, they start fighting each other. And the second thing is there will be in the group someone saying, I know where to go. And he said, never follow that guy because you'll die too. So the other one is that going primitive, or I'd say go into feelings, really what we as people do. But we're very sensitive at those crucial moments in life where you're lost in yourself or your life, or you're in transition and you don't know where to go or anything like that. It's very helpful if there's someone saying a very simple language that way, and we all follow that one. And the one with harsh voices.
I worry about authoritarian leaders that are emerging politically these days. And I think it's because we are what you call in the
liminality.
Liminality. And people are uncertain. And when they're uncertain, they go for the strong voices.
That's it.
For the people who say, I know the way to do it.
And if then they know how to play with your principles, it's tricky, right?
Well, unless you disapprove. I mean, this is again, we have voices now that cannot be suppressed. If we say that's not right, that is I disapprove of that use of this because it's not valid. We can fight back.
Yeah.
We have a voice now.
So we need to draw the line.
Yeah.
So it's really like you said in the beginning that you wrote a book to make people aware, not to get trapped.
Right.
And that ethics are important.
Yeah.
So should we have more conversations around that in boardrooms?
Absolutely. Now you will never. There's a law for shouting fire in a crowded theater, right? You can't do that. There will never be a law for shouting ethics in a crowded boardroom because you're not going to get a lot of activity associated with that. People in business want to do well for themselves and their shareholders. We have to show them that unethical business approaches lead to bottom line disaster. And we have done some research ourselves on that shows that in organizations that are dominated by an unethical culture, you get moral stress among the employees. They are stressed by the need to be unethical. And they perform more poorly on business tasks. We have evidence of this, if they are under that stress. Secondly, they leave. You incur the enormous costs of turnover. They are enormous. And thirdly, those people who leave are the ones who are uncomfortable, who are feeling stressed. There are those who are not stressed by cheating, and they stay, and they cheat the organization because you've pulled the snake under your coat. You've retained the people who are comfortable with cheating, and they will cheat you. Wow. Moral stress. I think there's a lot of moral stress going on. Yeah.
And so how can we calm it down?
Yeah.
Be honest, really, huh?
That's it.
So we need a revolution of honesty.
Yes.
And be clear and drawing lines.
And if we can honestly say to the leaders, look, your bottom line will be affected negatively by poor performance, by turnover, and by malfeasance among your employees. Yeah. Well,
what I get is that they say, well, yeah, but that takes time, that takes listening. We don't have the time. It's back-to-back meetings. We got to go. And they put more pressure in the system, so we don't have those ethical. That's feminine something.
I don't believe it. They can say it, but it's not true.
No, I agree with you. It's time that we have those conversations, right? Yeah. So if we look from now into the future, like you put down this wonderful legacy in your work. I'm 50 now, so I kind of, as with me, a whole generation picks up your work, and we carry it forward. What would you like to tell us? What can we do to bring it further?
Go primal and go ethical. That's all. That's all you need to do.
We will do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
What a wonderful conversation. I was just, as the host, I was not the interviewing, but I was just listening to you. Wonderful questions from Jitske Kramer and even more wonderful answers from Dr. Robert Cialdini. Thank you both for listening. And thank you, listener, for listening to this conversation of DenkTank, the podcast from Denk Producties. Thank you very much.